Hey TV Maniacs, I'm KG and today we're talking about badass TV shows that are raw, violent, intense, unapologetic and powered by characters who don't ask for permission. These are the series that hit hard, take risks and somehow still don't get talked about enough, whether it's brutal crime stories, savage historical epics or modern anti-hero tales that just refuse to play nice. So if you're in the mood for something mean, gripping and seriously addictive, here are 14 badass TV series that deserve way more hype. Let's jump right in. Kicking things off with Banshee, which hooks you with one of the wildest premises in modern TV and then just keeps escalating it. The show follows an ex-con played by Anthony Starr, yes, Mr. Homelander himself, who drifts into the small town of Banshee, Pennsylvania, only to assume the identity of the town's newly murdered sheriff. Suddenly, a man with a violent past, zero law enforcement training, and a long list of enemies is responsible for keeping order in a place that thrives on chaos. From there, the plot becomes a constant collision between local crime, personal history, and the very real danger of being exposed. The characters are what give the show its weight. Carrie Hopewell, played by Ivana Milicevic, is the ex-con's former lover, now living a completely different life, married, settled, and trying to outrun the criminal world she left behind. Their shared past adds an emotional tension that runs underneath the violence because every reunion threatens to destroy the life she's built. On the opposite end of town is Kai Proctor, played by Ulrich Thomsen, an ex-Amish outsider who's reinvented himself as Banshee's most powerful crime boss, a cold, calculating leader whose influence stretches far beyond the town limits and whose presence turns every storyline into a power struggle. And then there's Sugar Bates, played by Frankie Faison, a former boxer and bar owner who becomes the sheriff's closest ally, a grounding force with his own scarce history and quiet moral code. And Job, played by Hoon Lee, remains one of the most unforgettable characters on TV. Sharp, fearless, stylish, and absolutely essential, bringing intelligence and bite to a world ruled by fists. What makes Banshee special is that beneath the savage action and outrageous setups, it's a story about identity, reinvention, and consequence. Every character is pretending to be something: lawman, family man, businessman, and the show constantly asks how long those lives can survive sustained pressure. If you want a series that's violent, character-driven, relentlessly paced, and completely unafraid to go big while still caring about the people at its center, Banshee is as badass as TV gets, and it still doesn't get nearly enough credit. Warrior is one of the most straight-up badass action dramas of the last decade, and somehow it still doesn't get talked about enough. The premise drops you into 1870s San Francisco at the height of the Tong Wars, where a martial arts prodigy from China, Sam, played by Andrew Koji, arrives looking for his sister and almost immediately gets swallowed by Chinatown politics. He becomes a hatchet man for a powerful Tong, which means he's not just fighting for survival, he's fighting for territory, loyalty, and identity in a city that's built to chew immigrants up and spit them out. What makes it so addictive is that the plot isn't just cool fights, it's a full-on crime saga. You've got rival tongs tearing each other apart, Irish gangs clashing with Chinatown, corrupt cops, industrialists pulling strings, and a constant sense that violence is being used as a tool for power. The show constantly escalates without losing track of the people at the center of it, especially as Asam's personal mission collides with the life his sister has built for herself. Character-wise, it's stacked. Olivia Chang is a standout as Toy, a brothel madam who's far more dangerous than anyone expects, and Jason Tobin brings a ton of charisma as young Jun, Sam's volatile Tong brother in arms. You also get Diane Doan as Mei Ling, whose ambition makes her one of the most compelling power players in the whole series, and the chemistry between these characters is a huge reason the show hits as hard as it does. And yes, the action is insane, brutal, creative, and filmed with clarity, but it's never empty spectacle. The show is based on the writings of Bruce Lee, and it carries that spirit, style, precision, and a very specific anger about who gets the hold power in America. If you want a series that mixes gang warfare, political pressure, and elite martial arts choreography with characters you actually get attached to, Warrior absolutely deserves more hype. Hell on Wheels is a gritty, muscular western that feels like it was carved out of mud, blood, and ambition. The premise drops you right into post-Civil War America, following Cullen Bohannon, played by Anson Mount, a former Confederate soldier who heads west seeking revenge for the murder of his family. His journey brings him to the mobile, lawless encampment known as Hell on Wheels, the rough, constantly moving town that follows the construction of the first transcontinental railroad. What makes the show so compelling is how that setting shapes everything. This isn't a romanticized frontier, it's a brutal collision of cultures, money, power, and survival. Railroad bosses, freed slaves, immigrant laborers, outlaws, and opportunists are all thrown together in a place with barely any rules, and the plot constantly shifts as the camp moves westward. Cullen's personal vendetta slowly evolves into something more complicated, forcing him to confront questions about identity, redemption, and whether violence can ever really build a future. The characters elevated beyond a simple revenge story. Cole Meany is outstanding as Doc Durant, the ruthless railroad executive who embodies industrial ambition at its most corrupt and fascinating. Common brings real gravitas as Alan Ferguson, a freed man navigating freedom in a country that's still hostile to it. The Norwegian, a towering enforcer whose brutal loyalty and physical presence make him one of the series' most intimidating figures. And Dominic McElliott adds emotional weight as Lily Bell, one of the few characters trying to carve out independence in a world designed to crush it. Tonally, Hell on Wheels is dirty, slow-burning, and unflinching. It's just as interested in the moral cost of progress as it is in shootouts, and it never lets you forget that America's expansion was built on exploitation as much as opportunity. If you're into hard-edged westerns, character-driven historical drama, and stories where progress comes with a body count, Hell on Wheels is absolutely a badass series that deserves way more hype. We Own This City is one of the most hard-hitting, this actually happened crime series ever made, and it's not here to make you comfortable. The premise follows the real-life corruption scandal surrounding Baltimore's Gun Trace Task Force, a supposedly elite police unit that over time starts operating like a crew, robbing people, planting evidence, shaking down citizens, and treating the badge like a license to do whatever they want. The show tracks how that kind of rot spreads, not just through a few bad actors, but through a whole system that rewards numbers, protects its own, and punishes accountability. At the center is Wayne Jenkins, played by John Bernthal, a swaggering, aggressive cop who becomes the face of the unit's "we can do anything" mentality. And Bernthal is incredible here, loud, volatile, and terrifyingly believable, like a guy who genuinely thinks he's untouchable. Around him you've got Wunmi Musaku as a determined federal investigator trying to build a case, Jamie Hector as a veteran cop wrestling with what the job has become, and Josh Charles as the DOJ attorney navigating the politics of taking a department down. It's from David Simon and George Pelecanos from The Wire, and you can feel that same authenticity in every scene. The language, the procedures, the city texture, the moral complexity. The tone is bleak, furious, and unglamorous. No hero worship, no cheap catharsis, just a slow, engaging breakdown of how power gets abused when nobody's watching. If you like crime drama that's sharp, systemic, and genuinely maddening, the kind of show that makes you pause the TV just to process what you're hearing, We Own This City is essential, and it deserves way more hype than it gets. Kingdom is one of the most underrated badass dramas ever made because it's not just about fighting, it's about what fighting does to people. The premise drops you into the world of an MMA gym in Venice, California run by Alvi Kulina, played by Frank Grillo, a former legend who now coaches killers for a living while barely keeping his own life together. The gym is his kingdom and also his prison. The story revolves around Alvi and the two sons orbiting him. Jay, played by Jonathan Tucker, the volatile, self-destructive older son who's a terrifyingly talented fighter but constantly at war with himself, and Nate, played by Nick Jonas, the younger son trying to build a normal life while still getting pulled back into the cage. Then you've got Ryan Wheeler, played by Matt Lauria, a once promising fighter returning after a brutal fall from grace, and his comeback becomes the emotional spine of the series. Around them, Keely Sanchez as Lisa, Alvis' partner, honor as the glue holding together a family that's basically one bad day away from detonating. What makes Kingdom hit so hard is how grounded the plot is. It's not a sports underdog story, it's a pressure cooker of money problems, addiction, loyalty, ego, and violence where every fight has consequences that spill into home life. Training, the gym politics, the promoters, the injuries, the fear before walking out. It all feels brutally real. Grillo is incredible here, not just tough, but wounded and manipulative in a way that makes Alvy impossible to love and impossible to ignore. And the show's secret weapon is how emotionally raw it gets without ever losing that gritty fight world edge. It's sweaty, intense, often heartbreaking, and consistently addictive. If you want a series that blends family drama and crime-adjacent chaos and authentic fight culture, and you like stories where characters are messy but compulsively watchable, Kingdom absolutely deserves more hype. Black Sails is the rare pirate show that doesn't feel like a guilty pleasure, it feels like a full-blown prestige crime epic just with cannons. The premise drops you into 1715 on New Providence Island, where pirates have basically built their own lawless republic and the British Empire is coming to wipe it off the map. At the center is Captain Flint, played by Toby Stephens, feared, brilliant strategist who's trying to secure one massive prize that could bankroll Nassau's survival, but the chase pulls in rival pirate crews, colonial forces, and a whole web of deals happening on land just as dangerous as anything at sea. What makes it so addictive is how the plot plays like organized crime. Nassau isn't just pirates being pirates, it's politics, alliances, betrayals, and people fighting for control of an economy built on smuggling and violence. You've got Eleanor Guthrie running the island's trade like a boss, John Silver starting as a fast-talking survivor and slowly becoming something much more, and heavy hitters like Charles Vane, Max, Anne Boney, and Jack Rackman constantly shifting the power balance. It's badass because it's brutal and smart. Swords fights and ship battles, yes, but also long game strategy and characters making terrifyingly rational decisions. If you want a series that starts like a pirate adventure and turns into an epic about power, freedom, and survival, Black Sails absolutely deserves more hype. The Old Man is what happens when a spy thriller decides to age up and somehow gets even more dangerous because of it. The premise is instantly compelling. Dan Chase, played by Jeff Bridges, is a former CIA operative who's been living off the grid for decades. Quiet life, remote house, 2 dogs, until one night an assassin shows up at his door. Chase survives, but that single attempt drags his entire past back into the present, and suddenly he's running again. Not just from the people trying to kill him, but from the history he thought he buried. From there, the plot turns into a cat-and-mouse game with multiple hunters. Harold Harper, played by John Lithgow, is the FBI counterintelligence veteran tasked with bringing Chase in, except their connection isn't clean-cut good guy versus bad guy, it's personal, complicated, and full of old secrets from the Soviet-Afghan era. As the chase tightens, you also meet Angela Adams, a sharp agent whose own identity is tangled in the story, and Zoe, an everyday woman who gets pulled into Chase's orbit and suddenly realizes she's standing too close to something lethal. What makes the show so badass is the tone. It's tense, grounded, and surprisingly brutal. The action isn't superhero clean, it's messy and physical, with the constant reminder that these are older people who know exactly how to hurt you. And it's not just action for action's sake, the story keeps digging into identity, regret, and what it costs to live a life built on lies. If you want a spy series that feels adult, great performances, real stakes, and that slow tightening dread that something worse is always coming, The Old Man absolutely deserves more hype. Into the Badlands is what you get when you mash up a post-apocalyptic western with a kung fu epic and then commit to it 100%. The premise is instantly cool. Centuries after civilization collapsed, what's left of America has turned into a feudal territory called the Badlands, ruled by brutal warlords known as barons, each with their own armies of elite assassins called clippers. It's a world where guns are basically gone, Power is physical and disputes get settled with blades. At the center is Sonny, the deadliest clipper in the Badlands, a calm, disciplined killer who starts questioning the life he's built inside the system that only rewards violence. His path collides with MK, a mysterious teenager with a dangerous power he can't control, and that relationship becomes the engine of the story. Sonny trying to protect him, train him, and figure out what he actually represents in a world built to exploit people like him. Meanwhile, you've got a whole roster of larger-than-life power players circling the same territory. Quinn, a volatile baron clinging to control, the Widow, one of the show's best characters and a walking threat, and later the absolute scene-stealer Banshee, a slippery, hilarious survivor who brings a surprising amount of heart amid the chaos. The plot moves like a rising war drum, shifting alliances, betrayals, turf battles, and characters constantly trying to outmaneuver each other while the mythology underneath the Badlands keeps widening. But the real selling point is the action. The fight choreography is legit, stylized but clear, with crunchy impact and creative staging that makes most TV action look sleepy by comparison. Tonally, it's pulpy in the best way, violent, mythic, operatic, and weirdly beautiful, like a comic book brought to life with real martial arts talent behind it. If you want a series that's pure adrenaline, swords, warlords, epic rivalries, and a hero trying to claw his way towards something better, Into the Badlands absolutely deserves more hype. Mr. Inbetween is one of the most quietly badass shows ever made, and the premise is deceptively simple. Ray Shoesmith is a Sydney dad who's trying to keep a normal life going, except his job is being a criminal enforcer for hire. So one minute he's dealing with school pickups, a messy love life and family drama, and the next he's collecting debts, cleaning up problems, and navigating the kind of underworld politics where one bad decision gets you buried. What makes the show so addictive is how cleanly it balances those two lives without turning it into a gimmick. Ray isn't a cartoon hitman. He's not trying to be cool. He's practical, blunt, and oddly principled in his own warped way, which makes him fascinating to watch because you're constantly seeing him draw lines and then step over them when he has to. Scott Ryan, who also created and wrote the series, is phenomenal in the role, restrained, deadpan, and brutally believable. The supporting cast makes the world feel lived in too. Brooke Satchwell as Ali brings warmth and realism to Ray's personal life, Nicholas Kassim is heartbreaking as Ray's brother Bruce, and you've also got great recurring players who add texture, tension, and some genuinely hilarious awkwardness. Plot-wise, it's not a big one conspiracy kind of show, it's more like a chain of jobs, mistakes, favors, and consequences that keep stacking up. Every season builds naturally out of what Ray did last time, and the writing is so sharp that even a simple conversation can feel like it's hiding a threat. The tone is the secret weapon. Dry, pitch-black comedy mixed with sudden, matter-of-fact violence, and it never feels forced. One scene will have you laughing because Ray is dealing with something absurdly mundane, and the next scene will remind you that this man is genuinely dangerous. If you like crime stories that feel real, characters who are complicated without being melodramatic, and a show that can be funny, brutal, and oddly tender in the same episode, Mr. Inbetween absolutely deserves more hype. Tulsa King is a gangster show with a ridiculously clean hook. Dwight, the General Manfredi, played by Sylvester Stallone, gets out of prison after 25 years expecting to be welcomed back into the New York mob, and instead they basically ship him off to Tulsa, Oklahoma as a glorified exile. The assignment sounds simple, go set up shop, but Dwight quickly realizes he's been dumped in a place where he has no crew, no connections, no infrastructure, and every local power player is either sizing him up or waiting for him to fail. So the plot becomes Dwight building a criminal operation from scratch in a town that doesn't know what to do with him, and watching him improvise his way into control is the entire addictive engine of the series. What makes it work is that it's not just mob politics, it's culture clash, ego, and reinvention. Dwight recruits an unlikely little orbit around him, Tyson as his young driver turned protege, Bodie as the smart, nervous local who becomes way more useful than he intended, and Armand as a guy who starts as a problem and turns into something else entirely. On the pressure side, you've got Stacy Beale sniffing around the operation, and back in New York, mob figures like Chicky make it clear Dwight's promotion came with a leash. Stallone is the secret weapon here. He plays Dwight with old-school intimidation, but also surprising charm and blunt humor, which gives the show its swagger. The tone is tough but playful, violent when it needs to be, funny when it wants to be, and always driven by character. If you like crime dramas where the lead is a force of nature and the story is all about building an empire in hostile territory, Tulsa King absolutely belongs on a badass list. The Shield is one of the most ruthless, high-adrenaline cop shows ever made, and the premise is basically a moral grenade. It follows Detective Vic Mackey, played by Michael Chiklis, and his elite anti-gang unit, the Strike Team, operating out of a rough LAPD precinct in the fictional Farmington district of Los Angeles. On paper, they're the guys who get results. In reality, they're running a dangerous game where the line between policing and criminality isn't blurry. It's basically gone. The show's engine is watching Vic use intimidation, favors, manipulation, and outright corruption to keep control, while trying to stay one step ahead of gangs, the politicians, internal affairs, and his own team's bad decisions. And the characters are the reason it's so addictive. Vic is charismatic in the worst possible way, the kind of guy you can't stop watching even when you hate what he's doing. Wotan Goggins as Shane Vandreau is an old-timer performance, loyal, volatile, emotional, and constantly making choices that make you wanna yell at the screen. Michael Jace as Julian and Kenny Johnson as Lem round out the team dynamic with a mix of conscience, vulnerability, and how did we get here energy that keeps the story from feeling like simple anti-hero worship. Meanwhile, the precinct side gives the show its backbone. CCH Pounder-esque Claudette Wims is phenomenal, intelligent, relentless, and basically the moral center of the series, with Benito Martinez as Captain Acevedo playing the political chess game on top of the street war. The show also pulls off something rare. It keeps raising the stakes without losing realism. Later seasons bring in heavy hitters like Glenn Close and Forrest Whitaker, and they don't feel like stunt casting. They feel like pressure being added to an already unstable system. Tonally, it's gritty, fast, and relentless. Handheld intensity, ugly choices, and consequences that actually stick. This is a series about power, corruption, loyalty, and what happens when results become the only thing that matters. If you like crime shows that are morally gray, relentlessly tense, and built around characters who are both magnetic and terrifying, The Shield isn't just badass, it's required viewing. Taboo is dark, filthy, and hypnotic, the kind of period drama that feels like it's been dragged up from the Thames and left to dry under a gas lamp. The premise is a pure menace. In 1814 London, James Delaney, played by Tom Hardy, returns after years presumed dead in Africa, only to claim a mysterious inheritance from his father, a small but strategically priceless piece of land called Nootka Sound. The problem is everyone wants it: the crown, the Americans, and most dangerously the East India Company, which operates like a corporate empire with its own private army. So Delaney walks back into society like a ghost and immediately becomes the most inconvenient man in England. Plot-wise, it's a slow-burning power struggle where every conversation feels like a threat. Delaney isn't just fighting for property, he's weaponizing it, playing all sides against each other, building leverage, and dragging secrets into the light that powerful people would literally kill to keep buried. The show is packed with sharply drawn characters. Jonathan Pryce is terrific as Sir Stuart Strange, the East India Company's oily, terrifying figurehead. Una Chaplin is mesmerizing as Zilpha, Delaney's sister trapped in a suffocating marriage with her own emotional war going on, and Jessie Buckley brings fire as Lorna Bow, a woman with her own agenda who quickly learns that Delaney doesn't do normal relationships. Add Stephen Graham as Atticus, plus a whole gallery of crooks, aristocrats, and killers, and it becomes this grimy chess match where everyone is compromised. The vibe is the secret sauce. It's gothic, brutal, and intensely atmospheric. Mud, blood, smoke, and whispered conspiracies. And Hardy is the engine. He's almost feral here, grunting, staring through people, speaking like every word costs him something. And it works because the show wants Delaney to feel more like a myth than a man. If you like stories about about revenge, corruption, secret histories, and a protagonist who feels genuinely dangerous, Taboo is an absolute mood. It's not comfort viewing, it's the kind of show you sink into when you want something dark, stylish, and unapologetically intense. Reacher is what happens when a thriller remembers it's allowed to be simple, brutal, and intensely satisfying. The premise is clean. Jack Reacher, played by Alan Ritchson, is a former US Army military police investigator who wanders from town to town with no plan, no luggage, and absolutely zero interest in playing nice. And every time he shows up somewhere new, trouble finds him, or more accurately, he notices trouble that everyone else is too scared to touch. Plot-wise, the show is basically built on one irresistible engine. Reacher walks into a situation that looks small at first, a murder, a conspiracy, a local power structure that thinks it owns the place, and he starts pulling threads. The deeper he digs, the bigger it gets, and because he's both scary smart and physically unstoppable, the story becomes this escalating mix of investigation, intimidation, and violence, with Reacher acting like a human lie detector who also happens to hit like a truck. It's not just action for action's sake either, there's a real detective spine to it, with Reacher using observation and logic as much as brute force. The supporting characters are a huge part of why it works. Reacher isn't a lone wolf cliche here. He builds reluctant alliances with people who feel competent and grounded, whether it's law enforcement, insiders, or friends from his past. And Ritchson is perfect casting. He plays Reacher with this calm, almost amused confidence, like he's already 10 steps ahead and just waiting for the room to catch up. The tone is the selling point. Tough, fast-moving, and unapologetically direct. You get clean mystery momentum, sharp one-liners, and action that's punchy and practical rather than glossy. It's the kind of show where the bad guys are very clearly bad, the stakes keep rising, and watching Reacher dismantle a system feels like therapy. If you want a badass, bingeable series with a charismatic bruiser at the center, real investigation baked into the plot, and action that actually lands, Reacher absolutely deserves its popularity, and it still somehow feels underrated in the why isn't everyone watching this sense. Last Samurai Standing is basically Samurai Battle Royale, but done with enough weight and grit that it doesn't feel like a gimmick. The series is based on a novel and it drops you into post-samurai Japan during the Meiji era, when the old warrior class is being erased and a lot of these men are suddenly unemployed, desperate, and dangerous. The premise is immediately vicious. Hundreds of fighters are lured into a secret game with an absurd cash prize, and the rules are simple in the worst possible way. Survive, eliminate the competition, and make it to the finish. What makes it so tense is that it isn't just one arena fight after another, it becomes a roaming, paranoid survival run where alliances form and collapse and every encounter can turn into an ambush. At the center is Shujiro Saga, a battle-scarred former samurai who isn't chasing glory, he's chasing survival, and you can feel that in how grounded the character is. The show surrounds him with a rotating web of rivals and unpredictable allies, which gives the story a real scale instead of feeling like one guy versus a crowd. The vibe is pure adrenaline, muddy, bloody, and unsentimental, with action that feels physical and punishing, not glossy. If you want a series with ruthless momentum, constant tension, and a simple hook executed with real craft, Last Samurai Standing absolutely earns its spot on a badass list. So that's my list of badass TV series that deserve way more hype. These aren't comfort shows, these are the ones that hit hard, take risks, and don't apologize for it. If I reminded you of an old favorite, or if you discovered something new to add to your watch list, do me a favor and hit the like button. If you enjoyed the video, share it with a fellow TV addict and subscribe for more smart weekly recommendations. Let me know in the comments which show you think is the most underrated and if I miss any badass shows that deserve a shout. Thanks for watching, happy binging, and remember, sleep is optional when there's one more episode.